There's nothing that they won't try. There's nothing that they won't try. They will try everything. The question is, what can they do? What will they have the resources to accomplish?
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special for December 20th through December 27th, 2022, while supplies last. This week we feature backdated silver maples at $4.99 over spot, the lowest premium we've seen on maples in months. Made by the Royal Canadian Mint, these random year silver maples are known for their purity, beauty, and recognizability. One of the most popular silver bullion coins in the world. Their 4/9 fine, or 99.99% pure silver, are only $4.99 over spot and come $25 to a tube and $500 to a box, and are IRA eligible. Speaking of IRAs, if you'd like to learn more about a precious metals IRA, call us, and we'll be happy to help you in that process. Our number for all orders is 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're always glad to have this returning guest. Rafi Farber is the founder of the Endgame Investor. He joins us this Monday, December 19th, 2022. Rafi, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Thank you for having me, Dunnigan. I always appreciate another opportunity to talk to your audience.
I'm always impressed by the uniformly appreciative and respectful tone of the comments that we get under your videos. People have seen you here, they've seen you elsewhere, they follow you, they've come to respect and value your insight, your judgment, and your thoughtful perspectives on things. We've got a couple of big topics today. The first will be the Elon Musk recreation of Twitter, how you believe that's going to be impacting the freedom of speech in the world, and some of the latest pressures that have been put on him to potentially have to step down. We'll talk about that. Secondly, we're going to talk about, if we could, the title of your platform, which is the Endgame Investor, and what signs and significant events you're seeing in our current world that point to you as evidence of that we are in the end game, and what people need to be aware of that they may not be paying attention to yet. So if we could first talk about Elon Musk and his purchase and sort of reinvention of Twitter, basically reinstating a whole bunch of deplatformed accounts, then deplatforming some people, then putting out a vote about doxing and bringing them back, and now he's put another vote out about saying should he step down. It sounds like he's concerned and has stated multiple times about concern about physical safety for himself and his family, concerned about assassination attempts. So if we could take this in two major steps. One is freedom of speech. Whether you believe his takeover of Twitter is likely to change the landscape of freedom of speech, and if there's any evidence you have of that in your own life or in your own relationships or people's observations you've made.
Okay. So this is a philosophical question, and I have had some deep thoughts on it. And you need to be able to look into the past and see when something like this has happened before, where you have somebody who's very powerful. There's no dispute at all that Elon Musk is a very powerful man. Also, there's no dispute that he's not perfect, that there's a lot of problems with this guy. And he is essentially a creature of government subsidies, and we all know that. But he's also throwing a monkey wrench against the hardened enemies of liberty. And I wouldn't call him an absolute friend of liberty either. But as history develops, you have a lot of these sort of instances where somebody who you're not sure exactly what he stands for or why throws a monkey wrench into the entire cosmic battle that is going on, and you don't know exactly where he stands. But it is clear whether that he has definitely gotten the attention of the other side. He's not with that, the anti-free speech and the total power elite side. He's not there. He's also not a libertarian either. So he has to be related to as, a distraction for both sides, really. Like, we have the power elite on one side and the libertarians on the other side, and everyone else in the middle, which is the vast majority of people. There aren't that many people on the pure power side that are like, let's take over all of society and make everybody slaves. There aren't that many people like that. There are people like that at the top that are trying to pull people towards their direction, and there aren't many people like us either, like you and me, that are, let's maximize liberty on every spectrum that can be conceived of. And maybe I'm more extreme than you, maybe you're more extreme than me. We haven't had the discussion, but in the end I don't really care because I know we're basically on the same side, and the minor disagreements we would have, it doesn't really matter. But Elon Musk, he has to be treated with a degree of caution, obviously, because he's a product of government, and you can talk about brain chips or whatever he's developing, or colonizing Mars, and all these things that are very problematic. But right now he is mixing the soup. So he's stirring the pot, and we need that. And unfortunately, there aren't people like us that have his degree of power that are saying, okay, I'm really an absolutist, and I'm incorruptible, and I will just do whatever I want and have complete libertarian values. That doesn't exist. So history is a concoction of these types of things that just happen suddenly, where somebody who is in the middle and he has a lot of money to try to change things tries to change things. And now we don't have to rely on Musk to be our savior. I don't have any faith in him personally whatsoever. I take this as a sign that something is happening here to distract the other side from its delusions of absolute power, to give us some kind of opening to reorganize among ourselves. And so the really important voices are coming back. You have the doctors on the other side of the medical debate, and whoever else you want to talk about, whoever is personally important to you, like he's letting them back on. He's letting them talk. But to tie this back into inflation for a second, we talk about inflation a lot in the monetary system. What does Twitter have to do with inflation? Well, very simply, look, when the monetary system is inflated, the value of everything goes down, and the supply of it goes up very, very quickly, which is tied in. So what is a tweet? A tweet is the shortest possible form of communication that has the lowest value, because you don't have body language, you don't have tone, you have nothing in the deepness of the depth of human communication that you have in a personal interaction. You don't see anything. You just see words that are 144 characters, or however long it is. So Twitter is really the epitome of communicative inflation. Right? There's a maximum supply, and it's very cheap. It's free to just tweet. So this is the system we have. We have an inflated system, and then we have Twitter, and now we have someone who is trying to get the people that want to impute some sort of value into their tweets and spread them to the world and have some sort of equal footing, even though it's never going to be equal. So we have someone who was on their side, who is now coming towards our side, who is throwing a monkey wrench in the system, in an inflated system that is not going to survive much longer, but we may as well use it for now. And we admit that he's not great, but he's good. And let's take what he has given us and run with it. That's all I can say.
The second part I wanted to ask you about the Elon Musk / Twitter phenomenon is whether you have any insight or opinion about this most recent poll that he put out asking if he should step down as the head of Twitter. And admittedly, he's been under some personal threats, as have been his family. There's been doxing or tracing their exact locations and whereabouts. He's been known in the past for what you could call media stunts, or dragging things out or dramatizing them or whatever, as perhaps like Trump has done in the past or others have done, who are kind of masters of showmanship. Do you have any insight into whether this is further showmanship, or whether this might indicate that there's such intense pressure on him from the Twitter community, which arguably might have shifted demographically towards those who are not libertarian over the past couple of years because of the exodus of so many who were seeking freedom of speech platforms elsewhere? But do you think that this is an actual existential threat to him, and perhaps to this monkey wrench that's been thrown out there that might fizzle quicker, sooner than later?
No, I don't think this is really that big of a deal, because look, he's still the head of Tesla, which is a much bigger company. He's got stuff to do. He can't just micromanage tweets of people, and you can delegate. I mean, he doesn't have to be the guy in the front page that is taking all the press and taking all of his time and doing all this stuff. To get everything he does on Twitter, every tweet that he puts out is scrutinized. And oh, does he mean this? Does he mean that? It's imagine that you were in that position. It would just be impossible to manage. He can easily delegate to someone who shares his values and make an agreement with someone that if you're unsure what to do, just contact me behind the scenes and I'll help you, and just get my advice. And he has enough money. He can appoint someone who is totally his slave, so to speak. Or I mean legal slave? No, but I mean someone who's dependent on his decisions, just in the background. But even Elon Musk and most of us have our breaking point where we don't want to be the spectacle of media for every second of our lives. Give the man a break and let him do what he needs to do for his bigger companies, and just don't take it so seriously. It's just a position in a company. I mean, he can appoint someone else who will carry out his will, just like any other CEO of any other company. And it seems cosmic, but I don't think it's that important.
Fair enough. And talking about things that are important, you founded your platform, the Endgame Investor, evidently because you saw an endgame playing out, or starting to play out, or destined to play out, and wanted to be able to keep people appraised of where we're at in that process. Many of our subscribers and viewers have written to us, and when I speak with them on the phone, when they call, have talked to us about the difficulty they have in trying to spread the awareness among their people they really care about, their family, their coworkers, their friends, neighbors, that sort of thing, because they often get this deer in the headlights response from people who are basically steeped in the tea of mass media, and get kind of a propaganda storyline that doesn't raise any concerns about what's really going on financially or any other way right now that may be very, very significant for our lives going forward. As you have looked deeply into and interviewed other people and written and spoken about this, could you give us kind of your distillation of maybe some very key and critical points that you believe are important for people to keep in mind about what the end game looks like, what it has looked like in the past, in other instances where it has occurred in history? As you brought up, history can be a great teacher to us, but also what's going on right now. Some things that are in your current research are showing us that we do appear to be in the end game, and can help people to communicate this to people that they care about, and even to their own spouses or in their own household, that sort of thing, so that we can all be aware and prepared and keeping our eyes on the ball.
Like, this is an issue that I struggle with as well. Trying to communicate to the people that I love, and a lot of them I can't reach, and that's okay. Because when I purchase, let's say, gold or silver or whatever I'm doing to prepare for the end game, I'm not doing it just for me. I'm doing it for everyone in my circle, whether they think that they're in my circle or not. Because I know what is coming. I don't know exactly what is coming in terms of what it's going to lead to, but I know that all of the dollars in their bank accounts of the people that I care about, all of the dollars and all of the stocks and all of the bonds, most of the stocks and all the bonds of people that I care about, they're not going to be able to be exchanged for anything that can buy anything that they need. At some point, that is going to be true. And when that comes, what am I going to be busy doing? Am I going to be busy doing, oh, well, you didn't believe me, so I'm not going to help you? I mean, I can't convince anyone who doesn't see the world in the way that we do that what is going to happen is going to happen. I can only help them when it does. And hopefully their progeny or their grandchildren or whatever can understand what happened to them. Just like Germans of today's time can understand what happened to their grandparents in 1923, and they're preparing, which I believe is why the inflation rate in Germany, the price inflation rate in terms of consumer prices, is higher than in other places, outside of Germany, because a certain remnant is listening to the previous generation. And you're never going to be able to save the entire generation. It's not going to happen. What you're going to be able to do is preserve a remnant, which is what we're trying to do here. We're not going to save all of society. We're going to save a certain fraction of it, which is what always happens. In terms of how do I see this actually happening now? That's a harder question, but I would say that if you just look at the rate of monetary inflation, just the way that the money supply is moving, if you think about it logically, the more money that is printed, the more people exist that depend on that printing, because the more free money they get. And so the amount of people that are dependent on this inflation gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And as they get bigger, they get more dependent. And so the money supply has to keep not just accelerating, but not just growing, but growing faster and faster and faster. Now, in 2020, we had a point from, around March 2020 to, let's say, August 2020. That was about 5 months where the money supply was pretty much going vertical. And the people that were hired, that became part of the workforce dependent on that money supply, they're still there, right? If they are fired or whatever they're doing, whether they're counting, infections, or I don't know what they're doing. They're part of the military-industrial complex. Who knows what the government hired them for? But they're still there. They exist, just like all the classes that exist, based on all the money printing that has happened since even 1971. But for 5 months, it went vertical. All these people are dependent on the continued inflation. And if they are dependent on it, then if that stops for a certain amount of time, then all these people get fired, and you have all these statistics in the news where all of a sudden the unemployment rate skyrockets, and we're in a crazy recession, and the Fed has to print because otherwise the banking system is going to collapse. This is what's going to happen. I mean, we saw the same thing in 2008 when everyone became dependent on housing prices. You had all this class of people that were flipping houses and making money on that, and they all became dependent on it, and then it stopped, and then they were all screaming, and they infected their banks that they borrowed money from. It's all the same stuff. So what I'm saying is, because we had a moment, 5 months, where the money supply went vertical, there's you have to go back to that point where the money supply expansion goes vertical again. It just depends upon when the overhang of all the money that was printed from March to August, which was like enormous. It was like a 50% annualized increase in the money supply. That is going, that has to be replicated again soon. It's like when a heroin addict, has a certain fix and then gets off it and then has to go back to it. So it's theoretical that you could undergo the withdrawal, but at this point it's too big to be able to suffer. So when does that happen? Exactly when, I don't know, but it shouldn't be too long now because the money supply only goes in one direction over time, and it can't go down for too much longer. And it's been going down since April.
About 3 months ago, there was a story that came out that the Royal Bank of Australia, the RBA, was bankrupt or was insolvent, and they said it can't technically go bankrupt because they can just print money to bail themselves out. Can you talk to us about this phenomenon of solvency of central banks? Why what is it? What's happening? How are the current trends affecting that, and what the significance of it is?
Well, okay, the solvency of a central bank, you got to take a step back to understand it, right? Because a central bank is just a centralized version of other banks, right? So other banks, when they exist in the world, right? When banks started, what is a bank? A bank banks your money, and in return for your money, they give you receipts. That's all banks do. And then, sometimes they take your money, they invest it in other things, and they make money for themselves. So if you lived, let's say, in the 16th, 17th century, and you give your money, meaning your gold or silver, because that's what money was and still is, you give it to a bank, and they give you a receipt, and then you spend these receipts, and everyone's going around shuffling around these receipts and spending them. And then a rumor has it that your bank that you gave your money to, they spent all the money on, I don't know, a castle somewhere. Doesn't matter what. They spent it. It's gone. And they don't have it anymore. Then what is the value of that liability that they gave you, that receipt? The value of that receipt is only valuable in so much as the money that they still have in their basement, in the bank, that they banked in their basement. And if the public gets word that all the money is spent, then the value of the receipt that they have will go way down, because the people won't want them, because they will know that the value of the receipt, the money that they have for that receipt, is almost nothing. So it's the same with central banks. It's just a lot more. It's a lot. It's much more disconnected, because there's a lot of different layers there. But at bottom, when you have a euro or a dollar or a yen or whatever it is that you have, what is it that you have? You have the liability side of whatever is on the central bank balance sheet. That's what you have. You don't have a magical thing that can just buy something because the central bank said it. Central banks do not have magical powers. As much as we want to think of that, as much as a contemporary article in CNN or the Financial Times or whatever wants to tell you that central banks are magical and it doesn't matter what their balance sheets say, it matters, just like any other balance sheet matters. So when their balance sheets go down, their unit of liability, the currency that you have in your bank account, goes down in purchasing power as well. So when a central bank goes bankrupt, that means that its unit of liability cannot be exchanged for anything of value that's on its balance sheet. It sounds like technical language, but it's really just several derivative layers of the same concept. When a bank that you deposited your gold with no longer has your gold, right? Because everything goes back into the past. And I understand that it's much harder to grasp your head around that sort of concept. But there is nothing new under the sun, as Solomon said. It's just more convoluted now. But it all leads to the same ending. The same ending, that the stuff that is on the balance sheet of the currency that you are spending, which is a unit of liability of the central bank that issues it, has nothing in its basement that is of value. That's essentially what it is. And when central banks go bankrupt, it means that their balance sheets have nothing of value, which is why they are going bankrupt. And that infects the currencies themselves, which they issue. And the more they issue of it to plug up that debt, the less valuable those currencies become. And that is what is going to happen. They're going to fall to zero ultimately.
What, in your latest research, what concerns do you have about central banks starting to have negative equity, and what's driving that?
What's driving negative equity is very simple. The central banks bought all these bonds in order that the government be able to spend money into the economy and bail out the lockdowns or the housing crisis or any other crisis that they've had in the past 15 years or however long it's been. They've bought all these bonds, and the bonds are losing value. And in the meantime, in order to arrest consumer price inflation, they've raised interest rates so that they have to pay more interest on all the money, on all the liabilities that they've issued different banks. Now they have to pay interest on these reserves that they've issued. They have the Fed, for example, has about $5 trillion in reserves that are stuffed in banks' balance sheets. And the higher they raise interest, the more interest they have to pay on these reserves. It's just simple math, right? So let's say now the rate of interest is, what is it, 4.25 or something on $5 trillion. It's going to be a lot of money, and they printed all that money, so they have to pay interest on it, and they're losing all that money. And the money that they earn is interest on the bonds that they bought. Let's say they bought 10-year bonds or 30-year bonds in August 2020 at 0.5%. So they're earning 0.5%, but they have to pay 4.25. So they're going to lose money. So what do to plug up that loss? They print money and hand it out to the same banks that they have to pay money to. So what happens then? The banks that they pay money to, because they owe them money, because they pay more money than they earn, they have even more reserves. They have to pay them even more money. And then you have a positive feedback loop that happens. And this is mechanically, from a balance sheet perspective, how hyperinflation proceeds. Because you have more and more money that has to be paid on more and more money. I would say currency, because it's not real money. And it just keeps getting higher and higher and bigger until the currency implodes. And yes, it's true that this is the first time we have seen this on a global level. We've only seen this on a localized level, be it in Weimar or Hungary or Czechoslovakia or wherever it's happened in the 20th century. It's only been countrywide. And yeah, it's going to take a little bit more time for it to happen globally, but it's the same process. There's nothing different. And the question is when? Exactly when? Well, just look at food prices. That's what I look at. And when food becomes unaffordable, then people dump their money for any amount of any real asset they can get. That's hyperinflation from a street perspective rather than a balance sheet perspective. But the balance sheet perspective and the street perspective coincide. Exactly when? We don't know. That is definitely 100% the direction that we are all headed.
A few minutes ago, you talked about gold playing a role in the end game as the ultimate historical route from which all these derivatives, receipts, banknotes, everything derive their monies by referential integrity back to gold. There's been some significant talk recently by analysts, historians, etc., talking about there may be simplistic delusion on the part of stackers who've been accumulating precious metals. Yes, that's a correct thing to do. It's the responsible thing to do. It's a prudent thing to do. But thinking that this is somehow going to outwit or outsmart or out-gamesmanship the elites in this little small club that you talked about that we're not members of, that are pulling the strings of the whole world at this point, and that actually as I'm trying to remember which analyst it was who put it out, saying they're going to go after every last rat in the barn. They're not going to be content to say we're going to just wipe out the easy ones, but go after these as well. Meaning the stackers as well. That there will be twists of property rights, twists of making things illegal, making things, besmirching things, saying that this is from which money laundering and crime and terrorism and all that. And so therefore everybody turn against those who are hoarding and that sort of thing. What are your concerns, and let us know how credible you think they are, about gamesmanship that's likely or possible or probable to come out against those who are holding gold, making that even difficult to get through the times ahead, the end game?
Okay, well, they'll try anything they can. We've seen governments generally go to mass murder of entire populations to achieve their goals. So there's nothing that they won't try. There's nothing that they won't try. They will try everything. The question is, what can they do? What will they have the resources to accomplish? And one thing we've got to get into our heads is that these people are not all powerful. A lot of them are clowns, and a lot of them are stupid. We like to build this picture in our heads that these are like the ultra genius, brain pulsating, evil people that can do anything they want, but because they control so many. But they don't really. the mechanism by which they control so many is the purchase power, the purchasing power of the currency that they emit. Right? Once that no longer has purchasing power, then let's say somebody high on top that wants to, let's say, harass the gold bugs or the stackers, they want to pay someone to go to research who exactly they are, where they live, to go into their houses, risk their lives, maybe they're armed, who knows, and take their stuff. And how many people do you need to accomplish this, in how many countries? The thing is, you need money with purchasing power to accomplish this, and you need to do it globally. There's too many of us because there aren't that many on the top in the elite. They make a lot of noise, just like the woke make a lot of noise, and the people that don't believe in men and women anymore make a lot of noise. But if you're going to take a poll and it was, let's say required that everyone on earth were to take a poll, do you believe that there are men and women? Something, I would have no doubt that over 90% would say yes, there are men and women. And so there aren't many of these people, and we shouldn't keep giving them power that they don't have. So yeah, they'll try whatever they can try, but once their currency can no longer purchase much, then let's say Klaus Schwab. I'm just picking a name off the top of my head. He pays somebody to go to Dunnigan's house and take his gold. But what if the money that he's going to pay this guy to take your gold can't purchase anything? So what motivation would he have to go and take your gold? I mean, we look back to FDR. How was he able to take the gold? It was easy. How did FDR get all the gold? Because everyone said, okay, fine. FDR said, I'll buy your gold for $21 an ounce. Everyone said, sure, I'll help my country. I love my country. I'm a patriotic American. Here is my gold. Give me $21 and I've helped my country, and God bless America. Are people going to say that now? No, they're not, because they know that the whole system is corrupted. So it's not going to be that easy to attack the stackers. You have to have some faith in our power too, because even though each of us is much less powerful than any given elite that is mentioned in the mainstream media, all together, we are much, much greater and much more powerful, and we have real money. So you have to have some faith in yourself and some faith in ourselves that we can network, that we have real power, that they really don't, and have some faith in your ability to change the world, because just by buying gold and silver, I guarantee that's what you're doing.
Two things come to mind when you describe what you just did. One is that just as you mentioned the positive reinforcement mechanism of printing more currency and then paying that to the banks, and then you owe them and more interest, and so you have to print more currency to pay off that interest, is a exponential growth function. It seems that you could do this Operation Gold Grab by paying your minions with gold or silver, and that would be a small fraction of the stuff that you go and grab. I mean, that's what pirates do, right? They pay off their crews with part of the spoils. The other thing you mentioned was this idea that we can do something and should do something and must do something. Can you address some specific things you think people can and should and must do?
Okay, so in terms of let's say the elites can spend their gold and silver into the economy and acquire the resources they need to achieve whatever force they want, whatever negative force they want, they could do that. It depends how much gold and silver they have, but keep this in mind: when they inflate and when they print money to do whatever evil deed they want to do, then they're not really expending any of their own resources. They're expending our resources, or the middle class's resources, or the public's resources, because they're stealing from them. If they get to the point where inflation doesn't work anymore and they have to spend their actual gold and silver, like give the stuff to somebody to say, go to Dunnigan's house, get his gold, here's some gold, and I'll let you keep a fraction of what you take from him. Whatever it is, once they get to the point where they have to spend real money, they're not. That's a finite resource. They're not going to be able to do it that much. because when if you count how much money they have versus how much gold, let's say gold and silver, how much gold and silver the elite has versus how much gold and silver the public has. The public has vastly higher amounts of gold and silver than the elites have. We talk about this a lot. Like, we complain about this, like how much paper, gold and silver is traded on the COMEX or the LBMA or whatever versus the actual physical amount. The truth is they do not have that much real money. They have the ability to inflate. So once they can't do that anymore and they start spending money, it's a game of stamina, and the public has a lot more than them. They'll be able to violate a few people, yeah, not that many. I don't think, and I can't protect every single stacker. I'm sure there are some that will be robbed, but statistically, it's unlikely that they'll be able to knock on your door and get your stuff. What was the second part of that question?
Yeah, well, before we let that one go, I want to follow up on one aspect of that. There are some particularly large caches, supposedly, of physical gold and silver in these ETFs like GLD and SLV and the COMEX vaults and that sort of thing. So it seems like there'd be some low-hanging fruit that would be particularly meaningful and significant purses to be grabbed early by elite if they wanted to have plenty of hard money to pay their minions for the rest of the end game. And it sounds like, from what you're saying, from a strategy standpoint, it would be much more prudent of people not to have their participation in physical or in sound money off there in some ETF, but rather in their own tightly held hands.
Well, look, just thinking about this very simply, like, let's say assume the end game happens and the dollar collapses, and then you have a bunch of SLV shares or GLD shares. Do you expect the banks to say, "Oh, well, okay, we'll just hand that to you, whatever"? When the dollar is collapsing and there's not even money to pay the post office to send the gold to you, or the silver, what are they going to do? They're going to do exactly what happened. Let's say a Russia ETF. ERUS or RSX. These were Russia ETFs, and the government just said, if you own ERUS or RSX and they were invested in Russian companies, you got nothing now. That's it. You're done. So and who really complained? Like, who's going to complain? It's like, oh no, I want my Russia ETF. I own some Russia ETF. I own a few shares just because I thought they were good companies, and I lost it. All right, so I lost it. So what's going to happen to SLV or GLD? If the government says, well, SLV, GLD, they're destroying the dollar, so anyone who owns SLV, GLD can sell it for dollars, but they can't get their actual gold or silver. Of course, that's what's going to happen. Like, you can't even get your gold or silver now. What do you expect to happen when you actually need it? You're going to be able to here's some SLV or GLD shares. Give me some gold. It's not going to happen. They're decent speculative vehicles if you want to play options. And assume that the dollar is going to have some purchasing power even after the end game, because the Fed maybe owns some gold certificates and the dollar will be able to purchase something, and the 1,000 times that you get on some option is going to increase your purchasing power a little bit, maybe. But is that the core of what you want to do? No, not at all. You want coins because you want to be able to go to the store and say, here, look, see this thing? Take it and give me some food. That's what you're going to want to do.
The other half of my question was, you've been implying that we, the many, we, the people, have more power than the few, the elite. And I'm pressing into that to ask you to tell us more about that. What is it that you think people can and should and must do in this end game that we're walking into?
I guess for your mental health, find people who you agree with, who don't try to convince people as your primary goal, but find people who already agree with you and create a community. That will stabilize your mentality. It'll give you some emotional stability, which is what we are doing here. I mean, I wouldn't have met any of you people. I wouldn't have met you, certainly, if I didn't see it as an absolute essential that I go out and speak about this, because what I'm doing here is I'm not trying to convince people that don't care about gold and silver, oh, you got to buy gold and silver. That would be nice. If I would love to convince as many people as possible. I'm not against it. But what I'm trying to do here is saying, I'm here. This is what I believe. You believe it too. Let's create a community. And hopefully a lot of you, maybe you're good at growing food, you're good at growing this, and you have these, networks of this or that, and that I can hook into, that all of us can hook into. Let's create our own division of labor. I'm waving a flag and saying, I'm here. This is what I believe. I understand a lot about money, and maybe you're good at growing food, or you're good at connecting other people, whatever it is. And we're trying to create a community here. So be with the people who you agree with. And if you happen to convince people along the way, good.
Rafi, if people want to follow your work, I know you interview widely and you write. How can they stay connected with your work?
You can find me at the Endgame Investor, any search engine. Endgame Investor, it's a service seeking alpha, and I write 4 times a week. You can become my patron on Patreon, where I give a more religious angle on these issues in terms of biblical commentary. And that's the Patreon at Endgame Investor. Or you can find my YouTube channel at Rafi Farber, and I usually put out a once or twice a week video, and I try to make it fun and interesting. I don't want to be, doom and gloom. I want to be funny, and I want to put people in a good mood, because what we're entering is scary, but what we're entering is also going to be fun if we can maximize our capital in this time. Let's say. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be scary, and let's embrace all the things that it's going to be. Just move forward.
Yeah, there's when we started our channel, it was called Reluctant Preppers, and we rebranded it about 3 years ago as Liberty and Finance, because those emerged as things that were of core and vital interest to our subscribers. We still have farmers on talking about raising food. We still have other topics that we address about self-sufficiency and self-reliance, and that's part of the whole picture. That's what you're talking about, is people have those different gifts and different knowledge bases and skills, and yet the financial threat to our future and our well-being seem to emerge, and that to our liberty and our freedom of speech, etc., seem to emerge as the core concerns that people had going forward. So if you don't want to miss out on a single interview with Rafi or any of our guests, please go to libertyandfinance.com, put in your name, your email address, click submit. When you get the confirming email, make sure you confirm, and you'll be opted in. You'll get 1 email per day in your inbox with our latest interviews and our latest specials, and you won't miss out on anything. So we're so grateful, Rafi, for your presence here on an ongoing basis. As always, on behalf of all of our viewers, thank you for joining us on Liberty and Finance.
Thanks for having me once again, Duncan, and I look forward to coming back again.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we will let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be double boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Elijah, my brother Kaiser, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.